which is very much, this is kind of my, Arsenal's going to be better for this. This is how I would set it up for solo queue. Arsenal is, like, for malware, bargain bin's probably going to be, or pharmacy would actually be maybe more beneficial, but if you're in solo queue, you cannot SWAT, you can't necessarily figure out, you can't coordinate as well. Arsenal is just a good Jan passive, because if you run into things like Annette's or Daniel's, especially in solo queues, being able to buy a rocket launcher or a grenade launcher, especially grenade launchers, or even a spark shot if it's a Daniel especially, it can basically turn an Area 1 wipe with some randoms into a actual match. Because those special weapons especially, are so good at wiping out creatures. I made because I only ever played solo queue. I made a Daniel rage quit in Area 2 because, well, I think it might have been Area 2 or the start of Area 3, because every time he'd possess a zombie that he had buffed up, I would shoot it, and I had like 2 grenade launchers from this, and so I just pop it once with a grenade launcher, and it's like partial armor, well, it doesn't matter. I just shoot it, and then it dies from dot damage. Arsenal is sadly like a necessary evil, I think, in random. Just because there's so many times in solo queues where people just get stomped in Area 1 because of a bunch of creature spam. And because everyone has MUPs, or they got Matildas instead of quick draws, especially, or they didn't buy grenades because they're not running decoders or wallets and decoders or whatever, you end up not being able to handle a horde and like a bad choke point, and you get people that aren't necessarily good at the game that get themselves killed. They run right into the traps. You need something to kind of clear, because Jan's base skills are very much all oriented towards cameras and dealing with cameras. She doesn't start kind of being able to directly deal with creatures as much until Area 2. And Malware is actually a really good thing for that. So I think Arsenal is your best decision in solo queuing, although Bargain Bin's also still good. Disruptor rounds is a little bit of a weird one, because when you're using Malware, you don't really go for direct camera damage. Energy disruption is kind of good. I think it's probably better than high caliber, because your goal is going to be to essentially trap cameras and make them pop. But anti-armament, because it has even though it says greatly, has a much higher multiplier against guns, so you're going to get more value out of it in solo queue. In coordinated groups, SWAT, I would recommend energy disruption, and you'll see why when I get to the gear. Obviously Malware, this is all about Malware. EMP, just always run interference. Honestly, I don't know why people run these other ones. It's like, great, this one's fine if it's a Nikolai. Otherwise, if it's someone that summons traps and creatures, especially now that there's the camera sprays, this is just dumb. Like, it has the exact same cooldown and the exact same duration, but this one actually makes things cost more. This one just makes it so you can't move the camera for 15 seconds. Like, and because you don't know what mash run you're going against, there's no reason to run this one. This one, yeah, it loses a minute on cooldown, but interfering with the EIS only, like, it targets very specific builds, like trap detonation builds, or primarily just Daniel. And again, you don't really know what you're going to go up against, so it's generally just better to run interference in all situations. So this is a solo queue build. Which is, so instead I'm just running Energy Drink 3, 2, Decoder 3, Bulletproof Vest 2. The extra health, again, is just useful. A lot of people don't run any extra health on some of the weaker characters, and they'll just go down, and you're constantly rezzing them, especially against Nikolais. But extra health is always useful. It is. You'll notice that there's no EMP, and that's because you don't shoot cameras with this one. You can't really afford it. At Energy Drink 3 and Energy Drink 2, it takes about 33 seconds for Malware to go, and you want to constantly be using Malware on cameras. The best places are cameras that are very high value. The cameras that overlook the exit gate in Area 1 are usually a good choice. Casino, there's like a couple of cameras. Area 2 is one of the more beneficial ones because you typically tend to find terminals before you find York. So trapping cameras at the terminals and the exit gates pays off because you're basically guaranteed to get the 10 seconds unless they're running a deck with shield cards, in which case, well, whatever. I mean, that's when you'd run instant, but this is a malware build we're talking about. Decoder kind of supplements Arsenal and just generally makes you a little bit more reliant. Now, if you're going to do this in a SWAT, I would probably say something like this: Energy Disruption and maybe Pharmacy. I haven't checked the new prices since they patched Pharmacy to not be completely broken. Although you can still get Arsenal still good in a SWAT. Really, it's what your teammates are looking for. Do they want you to try to feed them guns or Pharmacy? Pharmacy is probably more practical for this type of build. Also, you're not going to need the Bulletproof Vest. Or really the Decoder. Because again, you don't really shoot cameras with this build. You want to trap. So, okay. So this is what you'd probably want to do. Something like this. Because someone in your group, probably a Valerie ideally, maybe a Jill or a Sam, is going to run Lucky Charm. So you're going to get a lot more credits. So you don't necessarily need the Decoder 3. You're coordinated, so you don't have to worry as much about dealing with the randoms going down against Daniels or Annette's in Area 1. And this gives you more personal skill cooldown and slightly decreases fever skill cooldown. I haven't tested the time on this, which we could do right now to see how long the cooldown duration is between uses. But this one is basically designed to kind of maximize your malware without also being like tedious. Like, I could put in Energy Drink 1 for slightly. It's probably only going to shave off a second or two. But this one is going to give you much better use. Now, the difference is, because you're not in solo queue, you don't necessarily have to worry about your HP because you're not going to be like, you're not going to have teammates that are not backing you up. Energy Disruption kind of makes more sense here because you're not really going for high camera damage. You could run anti-armament. It's kind of, this is a little bit more of your choice, but I would say Energy Disruption's a little more useful because you can just pop a camera with a shot and it'll pause it for each second. So you can get both of them going. And again, like, you're not running EMP rounds. Because you're focusing here on trapping cameras for your teammates. So the cameras are just going to go down. And this is just if you want to do a malware build. Lockdown is still really great. I've just been liking playing around with malware on Jan. I find it very effective. Area 2 and Area 3, it's extremely strong. Area 1 varies by map. Casino, it's quite strong because you can trap a couple of key cameras in the main area. And basically trap the ones along the route to the back area where there's always going to be keys. So it's very easy to get a couple of good trap cameras and get them to go off and basically keep the mastermind from getting a lot of momentum to stop you if they're applying good pressure. It doesn't work very well in like downtown because essentially the cameras you pass cameras as you go, and then most of the keys are right by the exit gate. Like you'll get maybe a couple cameras that are worth it in downtown. It doesn't really work there. Prison has similar. Prison has a lot of cameras in it in Area 1. So like there's I think 3 in like the exit area. So you can't really do it super well, but you can get a little bit out of prison. I wouldn't say it's one of the best ones. Research facility is another really good one. The 2 cameras that are in the outside area and the 2 that look over the door that lead into the back are all very good targets for trapping in Area 1. So it's like, and then in Abandoned Theme Park, I've gotten a really good trap on the one overlooking the main door. If they, depending on which way they've put keys, you can get some value if they've put them to the right side, back towards the office areas, because obviously you create a shortcut when you reach the end of the left side loop, which means that there's no extra cameras. It's the same issue with like downtown. You'll run through and largely you put the cameras behind you. But if they're going on the right side, there's the camera in the small hallway, the kind of like break room that's right off to the right. Good camera. The cameras that are overlooking the work area in the back there, especially the one right through the door. Also good cameras. You can get a lot of malware pops off those. So it's strongest in sort of in some maps that are it's very different because it varies on map layout, and obviously every area too it's quite strong in. Just fucking find terminals, man. Just go and find the terminals, trap the cameras, trap the exits. Cameras, like, it's good. You'll get a lot of utility once you hit Area 2. Area 3 is a similar thing. It's very oppressive on a lot of maps, but you can do a lot. I had one where it was just like constantly popping against the Daniel on Abandoned Theme Park because the first core was in like the gift shop thing to the right, or whatever it is. I don't even know. It's like a bar actually, or a cafe. And while we were in there, I just popped over into the back room, trapped the camera looking over the first one I trapped was the one looking over the first like moving platform, looking over the control panel there. Trapped the one in the back room, which ended up being a core, the last core. But yeah, it's just like I trapped the one that was across in the center core, and so like they couldn't impede us and just had to jump to the end area, which if you can get to the end and start trapping those in any Area 3, it's really useful, but that's more of a SWAT strategy rather than a solo queue strategy, because you're not necessarily going to have the time. Like, basically, they put one zombie in the back room, which then the camera popped. I burst down the door, flew a flashbang. They managed to possess a zombie because they had done it a little earlier, but then they just gave up. And then they couldn't do anything on the camera, so they just went to the final area and just put a bunch of zombies that just all got blown up by grenades and flashbangs. Like, Area 3, you can shut people down with malware if you know where to put them on certain maps. Casino, there's only 4 cores instead of 5. 2 of them only have 1 camera, which means you're guaranteed to go into each of those rooms. So if it's not the first core and you trap them, you're guaranteed to get value out of it. There's only 2 cameras in the other 2, and then you've got a bunch of ones that look out. Like there's 2 at the exit, which are kind of convenient ones. Like with Casino, if you know the map very well and you see where the cores are spawning, you can get a lot of value there. Like all Area 3s and Area 2s are good for malware. That's when it really picks up. Which is similar to Lockdown in that it doesn't start off as good in Area 1, although Lockdown is quite strong in Area 1 compared to Instant, and has a lot of other benefits, but this is just a malware thing. But yeah, this would generally be what I would say if you're in a SWAT. They may have like a different preference for 3 because you can get certain starting items. But I would say this is probably going to be a good SWAT gear loadout. And, you know, just occasionally tapping the camera to stop energy is good. You can go for anti-armament. There's no reason that isn't a bad decision. It's just that it's more about trapping cameras, so your ability to actually deal damage to cameras is significantly lower in this style of build. Um, yeah, in pharmacy, being able to buy a first aid spray in each area is going to be kind of beneficial because you're playing a much more support heavy role here. Um, and Jan is really, the damage label on her is not good. It should be support hacking. The only thing that makes her damage in the entire at all is Arsenal. Like, she doesn't actually deal damage. Um, she is a support. This is a very support heavy because you just go around and you want to constantly be trapping cameras. And this will probably be high 20s, high 20-second timers in between. Because it's 33 without the Book of Wisdom. And this gives you an extra moderate. So it was almost a 50% decrease on the cooldown with greatly and moderate. Extra moderate probably will knock it down a little more. So mid 20s ish. But this would be in a SWAT.